I'm Miles Sexton, a content creator, activist, and loud and proud disruptor of the norm. On our private bits, we talk about the things and people that don't get talked about enough, or at all. Trust me, as a sober, HIV positive, non-binary person, I would know. Join me as I chat with people in my life and from around the world whose stories deserve to be heard. Maybe you'll learn something new and you will definitely LOL. Our Private Bits is also part of the Acast Creator Network. All right, cuties. Today on Our Private Bits, we have a very special guest and one of my besties, Sarah, also known as the Birds Papaya, who is an amazing content creator, body positivity model, activist, been to Disneyland more times than I know anyone in the entire world. Sarah is literally such an empowering woman, and I'm so grateful to have her in my life. Want to say hi, Sarah?
Hi, thanks for having me here.
Oh, I'm so happy we can finally get you on the podcast.
I know. This is, we're talking to, you talk about some spicy stuff, and I'm like, bring me on. Let's unleash. I love this. I also love, you're the most adorable human ever. You just counted yourself in to start the podcast. You know that Lemmy does that. Whenever we're taking a picture, she goes, 1, 2, 3, cheese. 1, 2, 3. And I was like, you just did that. You counted yourself in. I was like, that was brilliant. I very much enjoyed sitting here and getting to witness that.
Thanks. You're getting to see the behind the scenes of like me mentally working through all of these things with the podcast and just in general. I'm always like, Tyler's like, I have to count for Tyler as well whenever we're like making content for things.
Yeah,
so he like knows what to do because he's not in my head, obviously.
Yeah.
So, oh my gosh. Well, I feel like to start, I really want to kind of just like talk a little bit about, I know we spoke about it a little bit on your podcast about how we connected, but I have to bring it up again just because I don't know. I don't feel like I meet many people in my life where I see them for the first time. I really didn't know who you were, to be honest, at all prior to like meeting, but there was just this like energetic connection that I feel like I had
magnetic.
with you.
It was magnetic, and we both felt it, which was so special. That was such a special day. We were at Boots and Hearts, and I remember just being in love with your outfit. That was like my intro. But we kept finding ourselves in these corners and like through the middle of like a tornado warning. And it was like everything was going on around us. And yet we were just so anchored to having conversation with each other.
Agreed.
And we couldn't stop. And I remember the next day, the morning, I said to my husband, I don't feel this very often, like so magnetically drawn to somebody.
Yes.
I want to write them, but I feel like that's so weird. I just met them last night. And as I'm typing to you, you send me a message.
Literally.
And I was like, you have no idea. This is absolutely amazing. But yeah, we've been in each other's lives ever since. And it's like, it's this weird like soul thing where I feel like I've known you my whole life.
Totally. I feel the exact same way.
I just was like, it's like we met and it was like, oh yeah, we have like these first photos together. And then we ended up having like a line of people taking pictures of us together as if we were like a unit of some sort. We literally met 30 seconds ago. It was amazing.
But I think it's really funny now, like now that it's been like a year, people, I don't know why. It's like, and we haven't even done that much together.
I know.
But like people think of us as a unit, which is so strange. And everywhere I meet, people are like, where's Sarah?
Yeah.
Like they just like expect us to be together now.
We've been together like 5 times ever.
Literally.
We just talk a lot.
It's so funny. It makes me laugh. Like when I went to Boots and Hearts this year, like everyone was like, where's Sarah at? Like I knew you were going to be together, but I mean, it's okay. Saved yourself from that one.
Stayed back from it this year. But you know what? I love that we had that like initial meet.
Yes.
And we have so many, like we've had so many times where we've gotten to connect, but we genuinely haven't been in the same room all that often.
No,
it's just
true.
a lot of how we've showed up online for each other. And I feel like you have shown up for me personally a ton. You're just like one of those people. Like I just don't see my life without you in it now. And I'm like, that's just how we are. And it's interesting because Shane really felt it too, like really connected with Ty. And I was like, look at us. Like we've come to visit you twice.
Yes.
You live 2.5 hours away and we have trekked out.
So appreciated.
Baby loves your dogs. Like it's just so many really cool like pieces, but you are such an icon in so many of the fashion spaces and so much stuff that you've been doing. And yet where we've connected the most is like just sitting down and like enjoying a meal. It's just, that's kind of special. I love it.
It is.
Yeah.
And I'm so excited that we get to kind of sit down today. And a lot of the things that I want to talk about, I've always been curious that we haven't really had the chance. You know, Papaya's getting spicy today.
Yeah, I love
it. But to preface, I think for maybe people who are not familiar with your whole journey, I'm wondering if you can maybe sort of share just like maybe a little bit about your journey that you've sort of been on with yourself, with your body to really get to this place of like who you are now that people see
Yeah.
online.
Yeah. Well, I think to start off, you did intro and say body positivity. And I want to just like take it back for a quick second because this is body positivity is such a blanket
Yes.
term that's been
Yes.
used, but it's actually mostly for those who are in large bodies, who
Mhm.
are outside of straight sizing. So I always try and like acknowledge my privilege that I
Yes.
am still straight size. I'm a
Mhm.
size 12. I can still shop wherever. So I'm still in a very privileged body while different. So I don't actually use body positivity anymore. I try and anchor myself in body confidence, in even body neutrality is like sometimes a really safe space to be. But for me, going back, I've been a creator for 15 years. But when I started, it was a lot of like your home or crafts or your kids.
Mhm.
And I remember just loving all of that. And when social media really came about, Instagram particularly, the camera shifted away from the decorations of your home and very much onto yourself, and
Yes.
I felt that, and that happened at the exact same time that I ended up moving back to my hometown, and I was in my 3rd postpartum, and I was about 225 pounds, and I had been in a larger body most of my life. Since I was about 12, I always knew that I was bigger than my friends.
Mhm.
I was often the biggest girl in class. Things were very diet culture-y back then, and they still are now, but, I mean, I was weighed in front of all my friends in the 9th
Oh
grade
my
in
god.
gym
That sounds
class.
mortifying.
I remember joining a gym and in front of everyone working out, having, like, inches of fat pinched on me and told how overweight I was when I was, like, 14 years old. It was a constant reminder that, like, I didn't fit into, like, this perfect mold. And so bring us into, go back maybe 7, 8 years ago, everything shifted to a social media platform that was very centric on what we looked like. It was the almost the birth of the selfie,
Mhm.
right? And
Totally.
the selfie and the outfits and the outfit of the day and all of these things. And I felt that. And at the same time, being back in my hometown where I was going to run into people. And I thought, you know what? I'm tired. I'm tired of feeling all this hate for my body. I'm ready to like take back control and I'm ready to, lose this weight. And
Mhm.
so I threw myself at that. I was so determined, but I didn't have financial access to very much. So I was doing it with downloading an app on my phone and working out in any way I could as much as possible. So I was working out up to 3 times a day.
Wow.
I was counting calories in every single bit and it was working. I was losing weight very, very fast. And at about maybe 40 pounds down, people really started to take notice. And I started to have, I mean, at that point, I'd been a creator for maybe 5 or 6 years. And suddenly people were really validating me. I felt so loved and approved of. And I started this basically weight loss Instagramming and talking about my body in that way. Ended up losing over 100 pounds. I got down to 113 was my lowest. I was a size 0 and I'm 5'8". So that was very, very, very small. And all I remember about that time was how terrified I was to leave the house. And you have
Mm.
to remember my motivations in losing weight were very centered in I just want to live my life. Like I want to not be scared of leaving the house. I want to exist around my children. I want to play with them. I want to be healthy. I want all of these things. But what I was doing is I was trying to hate myself into happiness. And so when I got down to this size 0, this quote unquote, what I thought was perfect, this amazing after photo that I've been presenting online, my life was in shambles. My marriage was ending. I was scared to leave the house because I was actually feeling so much pressure to be so perfect and so much smaller in this after photo that everything about leaving the house scared me. I actually had more anxiety and hate towards my body than I did at any size. And I really just had to take I mean, my life was bottoming out. I was moving back in with my parents. Anybody who follows me knows the story. I have 3 kids. I've moved in with my parents. I'm in my 30s. And I have to acknowledge for the first time head on that weight loss didn't answer my life's problems. I wasn't happier. I was struggling. I had a lot of health issues popping up. And while I never went for a formal diagnosis, and why I don't ever say I had an eating disorder, because I don't have that, I definitely had very disordered eating. And I
Mhm.
had a very bizarre relationship with food where it was so based in fear and just control in a way that was not healthy whatsoever. And so I was going through therapy at the time. My therapist was very much wanting me to start learning how to form my own opinions. I was married since I was 19. Now I'm, in a whole new stage of life. And she's like, you need to figure out how not to she actually called me a sponge. I'll never forget it. She called me a sponge, and she was like, "You don't have your own opinions. You have what other people told you."
Mm,
And I realized that I had to start thinking for myself and what do I like and what do I think and what are my opinions and all of that stuff that is so important to do at every stage of life, but was kind of new for me. And she encouraged me to write them down. So I started journaling my thoughts in the notes app on my phone. And at the time, we didn't really do long form captions on Instagram. And I started making these very long captions discussing how I was feeling and sort of tiptoeing my way into this world that I'd seen so many people talk about, which was loving your body.
mhm,
And I think I also fell down a different pathway with that too, where I felt that loving my body would mean that I loved the way it looked. Now, sitting where I am now, and, after a fourth baby and going through even more body change, I realized that loving your body is not centered in a feeling, it is centered in an action. Just like every other relationship in our world, as a parent, as a partner, as a child, as whatever, as a friend, you have feelings that come and go, but it is so anchored in your actions. And that's
mhm.
what love is. And I've had to remind myself over and over. So I don't actually love what I see in the mirror. And I think that that's okay for me to say out loud. What I do is I show up every day and I love my body and I show up in my relationship with my body. I show up as a parent in my body. I show up online in my body. I just keep doing all the things that make me uncomfortable because when you get to that point where you're just like saying yes is the hard part, but actually the rest of it is kind of just, I don't know, the cherry on top. I found so much confidence in just showing up as I am and not
Mhm.
waiting for this destination that my body is going to. And even if my body got to a destination, let's be real, it's not going to stay there. We're all aging, we're all
Totally.
dying,
It's
we're
changing
all
every day.
changing. Like we're ebbing and flowing every second of every day. So, yeah, now I'm just in a season of yes, and in a season of like, you don't actually have to love how it looks. You have to love how you show up. You have to just
Totally.
love yourself in action.
And I think I appreciate so much with you is that, like, you really are, like, I feel like you're showing what is oftentimes, like, are so stigmatized or, like, everyone just hasn't even unpacked or hasn't even faced, I think, the
Yeah.
amount of shame that they feel maybe towards their body, and you're
Yes.
posting it online, and I think that that is, like, dismantling so much. Every time I see it, I especially when you show your belly with, like, your stretch marks
Mhm.
like, I think of my mom, to be honest,
Mhm.
not, like, because you're the same age, but my mom used to, like, literally get so mad at me and my brother and my sister, and she used to, like, pull her stomach out, and she's like, "Look what you did to me."
Yeah.
And she used to, like, say it in such a, like,
Mhm.
demeaning sort of way a lot of the
Mhm.
time when we were kids,
Yeah.
and it's
You
just
wrecked
like
my body. It's such a common
exactly.
sentence that so many mothers often say, like, it's, like, often a joke and it's in jest,
Yes,
but, like, "You wrecked my body," like, it's very common to say that
totally.
and feel that.
But it's like, I love that you've just in a way of like celebrated, I think, and just I think changed the narrative and the verbiage that I think that you're using
Mm.
around it,
Yeah.
and I hope that it is inspiring. And I know it definitely is
Yeah.
inspiring so many other women
Yeah.
and people out there. I hope even for me, I feel
Yeah.
like you're inspiring me because going back to what you said earlier about I think just like being told that like the kind of the cookie cutter that you needed to fit
Yeah.
into, it's like I relate to that too. Like when I was a young teenager and going into my like early 20s, I went out into the modeling world and I was doing kind of like a type of modeling that was like, men's and women's wear. I was doing
Mhm.
something kind of in the middle and it was the same thing. Like everyone kept telling me I was too overweight for women's wear but I was too skinny to do men's wear.
Wow,
And it
yeah.
was like I literally was like at that time was like 20 years old. I think I'm like 6 feet tall. I
Mhm.
think I weighed 130 pounds. I was so underweight
Yeah.
because I was like in a part of this like psychological sort of battle of
Yeah.
like, trying to like just fit into what, adults
Oh.
were telling me to be.
Yes, it's ingrained in us from such a young
Yeah.
age and even into adulthood. We set these bars for ourselves that are based on our clothing. And I don't remember the first time I ever heard the notion of like clothes are meant to fit us, not the other way around. And I
Yes.
remember just being like, oh my God, I was never like, it's actually totally okay when I go into a clothing store and their clothes don't fit me because that's not a me problem, that's a them problem. But that's also a very very nuanced thing because
Mhm.
people are like, well, we still have to wear clothes. So where do we find them when they don't fit us? It can be such a frustrating process when you're going through change or trying to discover your identity or wanting to wear certain things and you just don't feel like you fit. The
Yes.
industry is built off a mold.
Totally.
So when you're outside the mold, it's very hard to sort of break that. And speaking of stretch marks, I didn't know other people had them like I did.
Yeah.
It took me, well, actually, me modeling for NYX and then posting a photo
Yes.
of me in my underwear for that to go viral, for me to read the comments from other people saying, you have stretch marks like me, for me to even find out that there were other people
Totally.
that existed that had stretch marks like that. So think back 6 years ago that I didn't know 6 years ago that other people had stretch marks like mine. And now I get to wake up and it's getting more common in
Mhm.
advertising. People are breaking the mold. NYX did that. They did it through me and with me. And now I get to, I'll never forget that because I had held on to so much shame about my stretch marks. It was a weight that I didn't realize I was carrying. And when that happened, I think I was about 8 to 10 years
Mhm.
postpartum of my third child. So
Whoa.
I'd had these stretch marks and I'd been hiding them since I was 20. So now I was able to sort of, the shame was gone. There's this quote I love that's once a secret is told, it loses its power. And I felt
Mm.
that.
Yeah.
This photo that when I first saw it, I thought I was going to pass out, puke, and crap my pants. And then it was out, and just seeing the response, I was like, it just shifted everything in me. And I think that I know that so many people are struggling and finding parts of themselves ugly or struggling with the grief of change,
Mhm.
which grief is just a processing tool for change.
Totally
I
it
think
is.
it's important. We can't just be like, just love it. Look what your body has
No.
done. No, grieve it.
Yeah,
Like
you
it's
have to
actually
go through those
okay.
steps.
It's okay to go through that. And also, let me be here 10 years ahead of you down the road, and I will keep showing up with these stretch marks. I will keep letting people be like, do you really have to show your stomach again? Yes, because we are saturated with one mold over and over and over, and there's such low representation for anything else. And the more of us that continue to show up in what we represent in our own shape and in our own mold, I guess, the more of us get to see reflections in each other or at
Mhm.
least understand that there isn't just one. There isn't just one shape to be. And it's okay if you fall outside of that. And it's actually really beautiful. And if you've never had a child and you have stretch marks or an apron belly like mine, the one thing I always try and remind people is even though I've walked that path of carrying life, because a lot of people generalize and justify certain parts of their body or honor it because it carried life. I always like to remind people like it carried yours though too. Like it
Yes.
carried yours. I did this video once that was like what I see when I look at my body and I showed all of these like snippets of each of my children's lives and at the end of it I say their names periodically throughout it and at the end it ends with my name because at the end of the day, whatever it did for anybody else is so secondary for what it's done for me. It's carried my life,
Mhm.
it's carried your life. That is going to also bring change and discomfort and grief and joy and all of those things too.
Ah, I couldn't agree more. And that's such a beautiful, like, I think, way to, like, sort of all
Mhm.
lay it out.
Yeah.
Now, do you think that, like, because you're posting, like, these images, do you ever get people, like, especially when you work with brands, being like, "Oh, can you post, like, someone that, like, looks like me?" Or, like, that, like, goes sort of, like, against, I guess, like, you showcasing yourself in that way?
Not too much. I mean, I've had I there's always like when you're working with brands, there's usually different things and it's not often I get opportunities to sort of showcase
Mhm.
that sort of work. Obviously, people like NYX are amazing
Yes.
because that's like such a big part of their ethos. It's just like showing up and finding support where you are. But a lot of other things I work with, I mean, the conversations are around like how clothing fits and I'm
Yes.
very open to be like this is how it looks here and this
Yeah.
is like, it's great that I sort of have that creative freedom. And I also feel like at this point in my career as well, I know myself and I know my audience well. So if a
Mhm.
brand is like, and there's also so much more to me than a body, there's so much more to all of us, even though I try and like anchor people in those truths because I'm so willing to do it. There's so much more. I love fashion. I love like family stuff. I love
Yes.
Disney. I'm going to showcase all of those things too. And you're not going to see my stretch marks in the middle of Disneyland.
For sure.
So there's like, there's such a mix, but I really loved I feel like a few years ago I was maybe a little bit edgier with it.
Hmm.
I remember just, like, fully being in lingerie online,
Yes.
and, like, I haven't done that as much so much anymore, and I think that's just such indicative of, like, where I am in life.
Totally. Because
Um
did you find that, like, were people, like, sexualizing you a bit? Like,
Oh,
do
I
they
mean,
still
they've
do it?
always
Like
sexualized me. I
yeah.
actually just went through this morning the filtered comments on
Ooh.
TikTok. I didn't realize there was, like, a section, and it
Yes.
was, like, so many people just wanting to, like, spank my ass, and I was like, "This is just bizarre." Like, I've just landed in a weird arena here. But, yeah, it's interesting because not as much. It's more if I'm gonna be completely honest, women are very judgmental. We
Mhm.
really talk about, the patriarchy, and I think whenever I share a troll comment, people always assume it's a man. And it always shocks them that it's usually women. It's
Yes.
usually other women around the same age in a similar
Mhm.
life walk to me. And we are so judgmental of each other. We really uphold the patriarchy because we've been so conditioned to feel in competition with each other,
Yes.
to feel judgmental of each other. It's common talk in a mom group to talk about what another mom is doing. It's common talk since high school to talk about another girl's hair or her clothes. Men are running the world because we are distracted by our bodies and our lives and being jealous and judgmental of each other. So I do find it really interesting when I look back at things like that. I had a really hard time transitioning into becoming pregnant because I felt like I was really owning the fact that I had stretch marks, the fact that I was like a
Mhm.
newlywed and I was a sexual being. And then I found myself to be pregnant and it was like I became maternal. And I remember making a post once like newsflash, most women become pregnant by having sex.
Legit.
And it was like such an aha moment for me and I think several others because there is this weird you're a mom. You have cleavage. You're a mom.
Mhm.
You're going to talk about these things and it's like, yeah, I'm a person that is a mom. Like I'm a human that is a mom. But now like I just am I just found it wasn't a battle I was willing to fight. It also just wasn't a place I continued to want to talk in. And I think is just more maybe indicative of like where I am in life, whatever. But I still stand by it. I still feel like women really lose their opportunity to feel like they are still a sexual being once they enter into a certain age or a motherhood. And I
Absolutely.
really wanted to like take that back a little
We
bit.
need to because we need to unlearn, I think, this, like, colonial control,
Oh my
like,
gosh.
construct that we've all like, especially groups that are, like, have been oppressed,
Mhm.
that are just so ingrained not only
Mhm.
in, like, how we were raised, but
Mhm.
also in our generational trauma
Mhm.
of, like, how we've been brought up too,
Yeah,
right? And it's like, I think it's like when we can recognize that when that's happening, it's like, like, "No, like, let's not tear each other
I
down. We are
know.
so much stronger
We
together."
are so much stronger together, and it's also really freaking confusing when we're going between,
Yeah.
like, "Don't sexualize me, but also I'm allowed to be a sexual human." Like, it's
Exactly.
confusing for everyone, like, but
100%.
that's what body autonomy is for. That's why we all get individual choice. We get to do whatever we want to do. But, yeah, it's confusing for me too because 'cause I'm always like,
100%.
"Don't talk about spanking my ass. I'm talking about going swimming with my kids." But
Yes.
also, I am a mother. I'm allowed to be sexual when I wanna be sexual. Like, it's really
Totally.
it's funny.
It's a tough thing to
Yeah.
navigate, I
Yeah.
agree. But, like, on that topic too, though, like, I guess so I was having this conversation with another friend of mine who has, like, a couple of kids, and I'm curious, like, what's been like for you because you've had, oh my god, it's 5
I have
total?
4 kids.
4, sorry.
Do
4 total.
not give me
I'm
another
like
child right now. Did you just will that into existence? There's a lot of them. There's 4.
I
3
confuse 2 of them
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah, yeah. There's 3
Okay,
teenagers
okay.
and a
Thank
toddler.
you.
Yeah.
And so what has been like, I guess, like your journey now having, because they're like spread out,
Yeah.
like what's your like, I guess your own sexual journey of like been like, navigating, I guess, like that with your partners and like
Yeah.
with yourself, like
Mhm.
as you've gone through this.
I mean, I was married at such a young age, and a big reason I got married so young was because I was in a very, like, Christian environment, and
Hmm.
so you had to get married to have sex. Not to say that that's why I got married, but I definitely think that there is a part of me that's like, that's
Okay.
guilt-free
Yeah,
life,
for
right?
sure.
Like, either one way or another,
Just
so
wanted some dick.
yeah, so then by 20, I was pregnant.
Yeah.
By 25, I've got 3 kids. My life just became like a bit of a it was never I never really got a chance to feel I don't know, I just went so quickly into, like, being a wife and mom
Yes.
that I didn't really ever get that chance to, like, even figure myself out.
Yeah.
And so I found when I was single and 30 and, like, dating with 3 kids, that was, like, a really interesting jump, but I also am really grateful that I was my kids are also at a very curious age at the time, and they
Yes.
asked a lot of questions, and
Okay.
I just was real with them.
Yeah.
And also I was also living at my parents' house, so obviously not much happening there, but they were also very, like, I don't know, my mom and I were really close, and they were, like, very open and chill with me too, but it was weird being 30 and moving back in with my parents because I immediately had a 15-year-old's mindset where I
Yeah.
was like, "I'm sneaking around," and I was like, "Don't tell them anything," and yeah, so it was really interesting to sort of come to a place where I ended up living on my own
Yes.
and getting and, like, meeting Shane, and, like, we had this relationship that was blossoming, and, really sort of taking that back. It's been fascinating, though. I don't feel it's interesting growing up in a culture that really my parents didn't do this, but just I spend a lot of time in, like, youth groups and things like
Mhm.
that, but the purity culture, and I haven't
Yes.
really talked about this a lot because it's still something that I'm unpacking, but how ashamed you are to
Mhm.
feel certain things, and I felt like my 30s really gave it back to me where I
Oh,
no longer
good.
felt like I had like, it was bad to want to have sex. It was
Yes.
bad to this or that, like, have these ideas or thoughts, or even I remember, getting to discover toys and talking about
Mhm.
that on Instagram, and at the time, nobody was talking about this stuff, and now it's, like, so commonplace for us, and I don't know, I'm so grateful for social media for things like that because I feel like it broke me even out of this mold of
Mhm.
shame of feeling like to want desire or to want sex was, like, inherently weird or bad,
Mhm.
but I think there's still parts of it that have always, like, lived within me. I've had a really hard time. I'm really bad at pursuing sex. I'm really bad at asking for it. My husband and I have been on the podcast before and talked to a sex therapist, and he was like, "But I like to be pursued too." And I'm like, "But I wanna be pursued first." Like, it's just such an interesting but learning that, and also, I think with so much body change, recognizing that I'm not less desirable and that my
Mhm.
husband has literally never made a comment about my body. Our sex life is actually better than it's ever been, and I'm 4 kids in. I've gained like 50 pounds and I'm like happy. We have a great sex life. We have a great life. We have great open conversations about things. And I don't feel this like pressure. I don't feel pressure to have a certain amount of sex. I don't feel pressure to feel like ashamed if I don't want it. And I also don't feel ashamed if I do. It's like a really beautiful, I'm so glad that so many people told me that like the 40s are like
Mhm.
it because the 30s have been so transformative for me. I'm 38 now and I'm like actually looking forward to my 40s. Like, I'm really looking forward to it.
I
It's
love it because
really I feel like I'm just, like, coming more and more alive as I age.
totally. I think you're just, like, getting closer to, I think, like, who you are meant to be, you
Yeah.
know,
Well,
and
it's also,
everything
like,
comes
look at
with it,
elderly
right?
people. Do you ever look
Yeah.
at, like, the stats for,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
STIs in old age homes?
For sure,
They
rabbits.
are fucking they're fucking each other all the time. They do not like and their bodies at this point, there's nobody with a ripped body anymore.
No,
Everybody looks like melted cone of ice cream, like,
totally.
whatever.
Gorge.
And they are all fucking and having a great time because 'cause they've stopped being so in their head about things.
Yes.
And I think about that sometimes, and I'm like, "I just need to channel her." Channel her in her, like,
Yeah, what is her name?
velvet outfit, and well, probably her name will probably still be Sarah, but, like, she lives in Boca Raton,
Okay,
and she's
cute.
just, like, getting dick,
Yeah,
like well, granted, if my husband is not alive anymore.
yeah,
If
for
he is
sure.
alive, I'm getting his dick, but still, like, I'm like, this is such a fascinating it's a fascinating thing to, like, put yourself in that, and I do
Mhm.
that for a lot of things in life. Whenever I'm nervous about something,
Yeah.
I'm like, "But 80-year-old me would love the story. 80-year-old me would be so glad she did this. 80-year-old me is
Yeah.
going to tell this story for even if or like, I love the whole if things go wrong, everyone's like, "Do it for the plot." Like, if it goes sideways, do it
Totally.
for the story. Like,
Yeah.
who cares if you fail? Who cares if things go wrong anymore? I am living for that. So 80-year-old me, getting the dick, doing the things, saying yes to life. I love her. I love her enough that I'm doing things 40 years ahead of her to make sure that she's got good stories to
Ugh,
tell.
amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I wanna go back to 30s Sarah that just
Yeah.
moved in to her parents. So,
Mhm.
did you, like, take that time to, like, discover your sexuality a bit? Because, like,
Oh my
I know you
gosh,
said you
Miles, I've never told these
No,
stories.
if you're comfortable, but
I'll tell it.
I'm just curious,
My
like,
mom won't
yeah,
listen to
did you get
this.
to explore at all? You don't have to go
Yeah,
into
I
all the
did.
details.
Not for very long. I met somebody when I was serving, and I had a very casual relationship,
Yeah.
but thankfully, I just did it, like, after work hours, whatever, and
Mhm.
it was a very quick relationship, but it really got me out of that mindset of being I don't know, like, it was a really interesting thing coming out of a marriage and feeling like such a lack of control,
Mhm.
and then
Totally.
moving in with your parents and feeling such a, "Oh my god, I'm 15 again," and so I was always such a good kid. I never rebelled, I
Yes.
never did anything, and so I actually have so much gratitude for that guy because he just it was just fun. It was
Okay.
just fun. It was a very short amount of time. And then when that floundered, I was actually like, whatever. It was actually so nice to not, I actually never thought I'd get married again. I
Mhm.
definitely felt like I would just date. Actually enjoyed that relationship so much that I was like, I could do this
Okay.
forever. I could just bounce around. I'm like, I never had my hoe days when I was younger. This is my hoe days right now. We're gonna have a little hoe down. And so I really thought that I was just gonna like go into that. But about 6 months later well, I was working Shane and I worked together, but about, 6 months after my divorce or so, we started hanging out, and
Yes.
I was falling for him, and I just liked him so much. And so when we ended up dating and, like, everything about him, he made life so fun, he made sex so fun, he made everything about everything so normal for me. You have to remember, like, my first wedding and this was not my ex-husband's fault, it's just how uncomfortable I was with my
Mhm.
body that I took so much Imodium to avoid pooping on my honeymoon
Ooh.
because we had never even been in same spaces like that before,
Yeah.
that I froze my bowels and had to, like, get home. I had to have, like, a doctor's finger up my butt to, like, do get oh my gosh. I actually, like, tore my bowels. It was so bad,
Yes.
all because I was trying to avoid pooping in front of my
Yes.
husband. That's how scared I was. So I remember with Shane, I had so many stomach issues at the time, and I remember him being like, "Whatever, like, poop happens. It's, like, such a normal thing. Like, stop
Exactly.
being weird. Like, go to the bathroom." Because I would, like, try and, like, leave and go home, and he was like, "You need to chill out." He really broke through a lot of things that I didn't realize were a part of
Mhm.
me, and also created an intimacy that wasn't based on sex. It was, like, so much more. We would go for walks, and we'd have such amazing conversations. We also, at the beginning, would have sex, like, 7 times a
I
day,
love
and,
it.
like, it's insane when I look
Yes.
back and I'm like, "Why were we marathoning everything?" But we just, like,
Just couldn't
really
get
had
enough.
we just had such a great connection, and, like, it's interesting because when I got pregnant with Lemmy, I ended up being put on pelvic rest. So we had only been married for about a year and a half at this point.
Yeah.
I'm now pregnant, and I'm not allowed to have sex. So go through that level of finding your intimacy because it wasn't
Yes.
just not being able to have sex. It was so frustrating to do anything else because everyone's like, well, you can do everything but. And I was like, no, because it's so frustrating because there was debating evidence on whether or not it was even safe for me to orgasm because of
Whoa.
the placenta previa that I had.
Really?
Yeah, and I had been bleeding after sex, so we had to just be so careful, and both of us were so terrified, like, we thought we lost her, so at this
Yes.
point, we were ready to do anything, and it was interesting because what happened was every night we would just, like, hold hands in bed,
Mhm.
and I remember thinking, "God, remember when you were, like, 13 and somebody held your hand and how intimate and amazing that felt?"
Totally.
And there's part of me that recognized that sex sorta took that away, that
Mhm.
I lost that level of intimacy, so us not going from, like, having sex so much, being honeymooners, into you can't have sex, and then into postpartum when, like, you can't have sex, it was a lot of handholding. It
Yes.
was a lot of, like, little tiny moments. He kisses me on the shoulder almost every single morning and tells me he loves me, and I'm like, "That shit matters." Like,
Mhm.
that shit is real intimacy. Getting to poop and talk about how you have IBS in the same space as a partner, that is intimacy. So, like, while the hoe days and stuff were fun, I loved finding somebody that I got to actually create real intimacy with and that we have gone through so much together. And like, even I gave birth to our daughter in my living room with him by my side. Such a beautiful moment that, like, so much of me was like, don't look at my vagina. And then I was like, you fucking look what I'm doing. Look what I'm doing right now. We were both just so in awe. And like, we wept for like a week straight afterwards because it wasn't just that we brought this child into the world. It
Mhm.
was like what it did for us in the relationship and how much that we really shifted and poured into
Mhm.
a new level of intimacy that was really so special. But that all said, he's also such a jokester. And because at the time I was dating him, I was living at my parents', we could not have sex
Okay.
there. And he had met me for a date, and we ended up having sex in a public place. And so when he
Ooh.
proposed to me, he
Yeah.
put a location stamp on the inside of my engagement ring. And it's the location of the rock we had sex on. That's Shane. That's the man I married.
That's so something I would do.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
love this.
Like, and if you've seen our proposal,
Oh
it's
my
like the
God.
most romantic thing in the world. And then
Yes.
he's like, go check out the
Uh,
inscription. And I was like, you have got, he's he's the best of both. Like, he really is so
but
funny.
have you done it
Oh my
again on that
God.
rock?
No.
Oh no.
Honestly, public sex is not as exciting as people think it is. It's a good
Terrifying.
you do it for the plot, but the
Yeah.
whole time I was like, we are going to jail. I have children. There was nothing enjoyable about it because I was like, we need to get the fuck out of here. Can you finish? We gotta go. We were both just like in a panic. Yeah.
You're like me.
Not as
I
hot
get
as
very
it sounds.
paranoid.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
can see us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very paranoid.
Tyler is like so spontaneous with like the like,
No.
when we're like on our hiking trips. I'm like, we're like just behind a bush. Like
Yeah.
people are gonna see us. And she's like, no, it's fine. I'm like,
I like a cushy bed.
For
I like
sure.
a comfortable setting. Like even whenever it's like sex on the stairs, I'm like, who likes this?
Yeah.
Every part of me is uncomfortable. I'm gonna hurt for a week.
Literally.
I am too old.
Every sex
Get
scene you
me
see in
into
a
a
movie
nice
where they're
bed.
like having sex all over a house. I'm
Oh
like,
my
no,
God.
it's
No,
awful.
even sex in the shower, I debate. Because
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
like, come on. It's water is actually so sticky against the skin. It's always just a battle. Like just give up the gig, guys. It's not that great.
Agreed. Oh my gosh. I do want to say something though, going back to your
Yeah.
point of like the like real intimacy versus like maybe like the heat of the moment.
Mhm.
Because I think that point you made is it's so important for us as humans to differentiate. I think when we're getting like a high hit of like dopamine versus like actually like sharing this sort of like real intimacy moment with someone, because you're so right. I think a lot of the time now where we're seeing a lot of like people, where casual sex is becoming more common,
Yeah.
which is awesome.
Yeah.
But I think people also need to be aware of like the fact of like that it is like what makes you feel so good is the dopamine,
Mhm.
And so it's like understanding that like dopamine is still like a drug that your body is giving you in sort of this moment. And like when that wears away, whether you're in a relationship or like you're constantly seeking new people to like get that sort of newness or like that spark, that there is, I think, a very different level of intimacy that you have to build, I think, with your partner. And
Mhm.
and it does take work. And, I think even with Tyler and I, like, we were the same way. Like when we first started dating, it was like we were having literally sex so much, we were getting like UTIs, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, this is the worst, But it
Yeah.
was like, but but then like as we sort of are going into our relationship, it's like we need to define these moments, like our schedules aren't lining up, we're exhausted. Like how are we expressing intimacy like within our
Yes.
relationship?
Yes.
And I really want to encourage like everyone, whether they're in a relationship, and this also can be with your friends and your parents too. It's like how are you like having these moments of intimacy with these people
Mhm.
around you and in your life? So
Yeah, and I think if you really anchor a relationship on sex, then you put yourself in the position to lose out on a lot of things. Like sex is
yes.
such a complementary, intimate thing that you can share together. But how much you do it, how long it lasts, all
Mhm.
of that is so not important. Like we could have sex 5 times a week and other times like twice a month.
Yeah.
And our relationship is on such a baseline core, even the fact that we were in a sexless marriage because of my health
Mhm.
and or like for some couples it's for mental health, it's going through trauma healing, whatever those
Yes.
things are. And so I think it's really leaning into the whole thing. But one thing I really have always hated is the term making love,
Ugh.
because I don't like the notion that sex equals love.
Yes,
Like sex
totally.
is sex and love can lead to sex,
Yes.
or sex can lead to love, but they don't necessarily create that. You don't make love in
No.
that. And I think it also makes a lot of like over emotional bearings on what sex is.
Yes.
And I'm really, it's such a fascinating thing because when I was younger and learning like your sexual self and who you had sex with was like giving a part of yourself,
Yeah.
and you were less of a person and less
Mhm.
valuable the more sex
Ugh.
you had, makes it really hard when you're like, how do I discover myself, or how Is that mean is I can't even imagine how many people are in relationships with somebody because they had sex with them and felt like they would be less of a person if they had sex with somebody else. And so I'm glad that there's a lot more sex positive
Mhm.
conversations. I love that especially adolescents are growing up in spaces where they learn about sex and talk about it more freely that I feel will lead to hopefully more decisions and less shame driven things or less rebellion driven things. I don't really know. And I don't really know there's any I have friends who have only ever had sex with their partners and I have other friends who have sex with like hundreds of people and that has no determining value on who they are and how they are
No.
in relationships
Totally.
or their worth whatsoever. Like it genuinely doesn't matter that way. So it's a constant reminder for myself too, because I did really grow up in that narrative where even divorce, the fact that I was divorced, and I remember even going on a vacation with Shane before we were married, and the
Mhm.
amount of people that shamed me for like having an overnight date with my partner,
Ugh,
which I knew was going to be my life partner. And I really just had to like anchor myself in like my own truths. And everybody is allowed to have their own decisions on
for
how
sure.
they operate with things. But yeah, I really think that there needs to be a better understanding of like sex versus intimacy. Yeah.
100%. Because I think it's just unfortunate that a lot of people, maybe they don't get like to a depth of intimacy with their partner, and having sex is like the only moment in their
Yeah.
relationship that they feel some sort of like connection to them,
Yeah, and
because
sex is great for that. Sex can
yeah,
really do that, right?
totally. But it's like, but it's really sad that like I think a lot of people like they don't know how to like grow that further with their
Yeah.
partner, or it's like that's the only time their partner is affectionate to them
Yeah.
in any way,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
and a lot of the time we like latch on to that sort of moment, and
Mhm.
that's that little piece that we hold on to, but
Mhm.
it's like maybe that person isn't the right person for you, or
Yeah.
maybe that's you need
Exactly.
to grow more with this person if that person's also willing to meet you halfway,
Yeah.
so
One thing that we do in our relationship too and is we don't have obligatory sex. Like
ugh,
we don't have sex unless both of us are a
love
hell
it.
yes. And that's been so important for us. And it's a learning curve too when you're like it's not about and you learn so fast. It's never about what you look like. It's never about
Mhm.
you. It's usually stressed, tired,
Totally.
whatever. But when there's no obligation sex, then that other person never feels like they're putting the other person through it. I remember going through that period where I wasn't able to have sex, and I felt a lot of guilt that I
Yeah.
was, like, some sort of a bad wife, that I couldn't perform for my husband
Ugh,
this way, and he
yeah,
was like, "Sarah, this your job and your relationship with me is not determined on me getting off. Like,
totally.
that is not your responsibility, I'm taking it off the table." And the relief I felt because I was already going through so much that he was just like, "You have 0 obligation to me whatsoever. Your job is not to do this, like,
Yeah.
is not to meet my need when you're doing everything right now. You're literally growing our child." It was such a relief, and we've just since that have never had I've literally can say that I've never had sex with my husband without fully wanting to have sex with my
Ugh,
husband.
that's
And I
amazing.
just feel like there needs to be more and I know people go through periods where sometimes for some couples, like, they actually need to almost oblige to sex to even want to have sex, like, they
Mm,
need to
so
sort of
true.
it needs to start before they, like, really get to it. So I'm not judging any other way that anybody does it, but that's been a really great way for me to honor my yes and
Yes.
honor my body and my choice, which has been a really, really freeing thing and has honestly just made me wanna have sex more.
But did you have to, like, go through, I guess, like, in that moment of, like, when you were sort of feeling the shame and guilt, did you have to, like, ask yourself being like, "Oh, is, like, is Shane gonna, like, cheat on me? Are we gonna open up our relationship?" Like,
Yeah.
did you have those thoughts at all? Like
No, I didn't, but I just more like didn't I never want there to be I just remember this from so long ago
mhm.
going through therapy in my first marriage and the therapist said there's almost no coming back from resentment. And
Yes.
I just never wanted resentment to grow and I never
Mhm.
wanted it to build and I know that sometimes things can be irrational and it was such a strange time. And so I just never wanted him to feel resentment towards the process or the what we were going through. And I think I was carrying it a lot more, especially because we had such a sexual relationship when we were newlyweds,
Mhm.
that suddenly being removed felt like I wasn't again, purity culture, serve your
Yes.
partner, serve your husband. I felt like I wasn't doing my job. And so it took him saying like it's not your job. Like we are
Totally, that's so
partners.
healing.
We are
Ugh.
partners. Like this is not your response. I think he said something to me like I have 2 hands for a reason and I was like,
Ooh.
God bless. But it's true. It's not like he was like the whole notion that he was not going to find any relief whatsoever ever and it was totally my fault because I was pregnant and this whole thing. was not real at all. And he found it very unfair that I would put myself in a position where I only could please him when I couldn't get anything in return, which is why we really met at this place of nothing is an obligation. And we waited until we could have sex again. And our sex life came back really, really nicely over time. And as I healed, obviously, from literally pushing a baby out of my vagina. And it's been really great. It's such a weird thing because I wouldn't wish that on anybody, but it really put our relationship through something that I think is really something I'll always cherish.
Totally. I
Yeah.
almost let you like refocus, I
Yeah.
think, on like a lot of
And
really important things that might get missed sometimes.
yeah, and I think as women, so often because we're sexualized pretty much from the get-go
Yes.
of like puberty, you hear from like adolescents that you're distracting boys, that all that stuff, and then
Ugh.
it's all about like being attractive for men and being attractive enough for men and making sure that they like you, making sure that they want you, making sure that you are, hot.
Yes.
And so to be in a position where you realize like your body is not what is serving the relationship, is not the most important part of your relationship, is such a freeing thing too. And actually allowed me time and space to properly process. If I actually did a podcast back when I was struggling with the fact that I had this new apron belly
Mhm.
after delivering my fourth child, and my husband literally on the pod was like, I still want you to get on top. Like, I know your stomach is there and I'm asking you. Like, I love it. Like, it is not a thing for me like it is for you because he's attracted to me. It is not
Mhm.
like the belly is not a thing for him. Like, he does not care. He's never made a comment. It's been a thing for me. It's been in my head because we are
Mhm.
so conditioned to feel like our bodies are what we're bringing to a relationship. And so taking it off the table and getting to feel loved and appreciated for everything else was really a beautiful time.
Well,
Yeah.
we all need to find our Shane.
Yeah. I thought you said shame at first. I was like,
No.
imagine. Yeah, we all need to find our
He is a
Shane.
gem of a
He
human.
is. Yeah.
Well, Sarah, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for your vulnerability today. Thanks for getting a
Yeah.
little spicy with
Oh
me.
my
I was so
God.
excited to
Can't
chat
believe
about
you made
sex
me
with you.
confess about my hoe days.
I still want to know more, but we might have to shut the
Oh my
mics
God. Yeah. No,
off.
thank you so much. This is such a fun conversation. And I love talking about the bridge between how we feel about our bodies and our sexual selves and really owning the nuances between it. Because like we've said, like nothing really even makes sense to us all the
No.
time. And it's such a process. It's such a learning. Everybody does everything so differently from each other. And how much better we are when we don't judge each other and we
Yes.
really come into what works for us and what we are and the shapes that we're building and who we're shaping ourselves into. That's what's most important.
100%. Before we sign off, can you just let everyone know where they can find you before we let them all go?
Oh my God, of course. Usually I'm in Instagram stories because I cannot shut up. And so I'm at the Birds Papaya on Instagram, and that's sort of the wheelhouse. You can find me under everything else under there. Yeah.
Love it. Well, thank you so much again.
Thank you.
I love you.
Love you.